felt a bit less useful.
Great. So, sort of building on from that point, I mean, the idea that we have less information than some other actors, particularly in the state, and the state is inaccessible, don't you think that there would be an incentive for those who manage and control the state to keep it inaccessible because they could gatekeep it? If everything was predictable, accessible, the state services, I mean, I use, for example, the UK Gov website. I mean, everything is accessible on whether you are using your ID card, your passport, license, anything, your NHS card. It's all a single website, very extremely easy to use. But in many developing countries where the state actors who control the state want to keep it inaccessible because it's that gatekeeping that increases their power. How does that dimension play?
Well, you have a point, definitely. But I think over the years, now even in a country like ours, a lot of good things have happened, and mainly due to digitization. You see, now it is coming in very fast, and it could be ID card. NADRA has played a great role, very positive role. So you don't have to run around to find where to vote, what is my voters list number, and it's all digital. I think one answer to minimize Safarish and make it a egalitarian, equality-based systems is to digitize. The least of the human interaction is now the call of the day. It used to be probably the other way around, that you need to have a human contact, accessibility and interaction, and we always thought it was good to know somebody and be with somebody. But now, if you laid out your systems, which the West has done in many ways very well, that is why it's all on the website, it's all there, and the systems come into play. So I think, but having said that, even in the West, lobbying and mafias and people playing a role at a different level, because what is Safarish? Safarish is ultimately a symbol of power. As long as there is a power game going on in the world, influence game and game of fear, chasing more and more this greed, this to be first always, and whether you deserve it or not, this may not totally eliminate.
And if I may quickly come in on that, I mean, look, hand on heart, I know I'm British, I should be saying everything in Britain works brilliantly well. That's not true. Big secret revealed in this room for the first time today. Some of our government systems work really well. Some really don't. Some government services work really well. Some don't. So the state can be very inaccessible as well. I very much agree with you, sir, that I think digitisation is a pathway to significantly improve the performance of the state and to reduce, the ability for Chalaki to influence some of that as well. Having said that, I differ slightly, if I may, because I still think we'll have those exception cases where the system runs it through, but there's a particular reason why that particular case isn't quite fitting with the rules. And we all know that there's always going to be the case that proves the rules, the exception that proves the rules. And if I may, the other example I'd give, which I think is really interesting, I teach the case study of the motorway police in Pakistan at LSE. It's a great case study. It's a great case study. Because it turns out that engaging with the motorway police is different to previous experiences sometimes of dealing with the police. Right? And it's different because the culture of that service is different. It's different because the norms when you get on the motorway are different. So there's also something here that isn't just about systems, it isn't just about the digital, although the digital and cameras and things like that help. There's something here about how do you change the informal culture of a unit of government. And so in some ways, what this whole theme, I think, around positive Safarish speaks to is that culture is often more important than systems. Culture is often more important than systems. Culture can improve or degrade a system, and a norm can improve or degrade a system, and it's why having some forms of informal resolution are really important, even if we improve and continue to improve the way in which government operates.
So I think both very important points, digitization and the role of norms. But let me finish the digitization part, and then we maybe have a little discussion on social norms, and then I want to talk about how those social norms change, and then we open up the floor for discussion. I think Kamran sir, what you mentioned is very important. Pakistan was one of the leaders, actually, in biometric-based application to social services, and it all happened through the unintended consequence. You had 9/11, there was greater requirement by international partners to know who's coming and going, whether or not you have an ID system that tracks, and then you had floods and IDPs, and you needed to make sure that those who get the support are registered. And gradually the system, and then the Benazir Income Support Program is an excellent example, which was set up by a political government, but every subsequent government has actually used the same database. And now you could even have your property divided based on those. So I think this is an important point. But of course, in the rural areas, for example, you were a deputy commissioner yourself, a lot of the elite influence, especially of the members of parliaments, the MPAs and the MNAs, is predicated on gatekeeping access to the state. If you want to access the police, the judiciary, the local services, you need somebody's intervention, and it's often the MP that would then intervene on that behalf. And that's obviously not being digitized, because that's an important gatekeeping function which determines the success of these politicians.
Definitely, I think the bureaucracy is pitched in such a way that a lot of times it doesn't move or it doesn't get sensitized unless there is a Safarish. And it may not be only the MPAs or it could be any notable, any person. When I go to the village, I have some lands near Afkar-e-Taza Sahibal, so the villagers keep coming, sir, please. So I take my cards from my pocket and I keep writing. All I write is, please look into his matter. Please see that if this is workable, this is legal. So this is in a way, if this also you take it out, and they do not have anybody to really play that intermediary role or a pushing role, then I think that's a further disadvantage. But now where to draw the line? Because a lot of times a person of influence or power will try to extract certain privileges which are not his due, and at the cost of someone else, particularly when it's, let's say, recruitment's taking place. There are 10 people who have applied, there is one job, so you need to see who merits most. A lot of times people say, sir, he's also qualified, you wrote that there should be masters in history, let's suppose. So I'm asking for this guy, his master's in history, he's first class, please give him the job. What's wrong about it? But you have to see him in comparison to the others. And that they won't understand. And they will insist, no, he qualifies, so you go ahead and do that. So, but my point is, at times it's a good thing, it helps, it aids to people who are dispossessed or underprivileged or do not have know-how, but at times, if it's a negative Safarish, then that's a huge problem.
The other thing which is important, I mean, you talked about social norms. And a lot of those norms obviously exist in the way in which communities create solidarities, fraternities amongst each other. And so we have, human history has moved from the world of personalized exchange, village level exchange where you know everyone, to an impersonal exchange where everything is governed by laws and the state. It's very impersonal. Now, obviously, as you develop more, you move into the world of impersonal exchange. And the eBay, Amazon, Airbnb, they're classic examples of impersonal exchange. You could have a one-shot transaction. But that creates its own challenges. So in the West, for example, the idea that there is a community which has mutually binding reciprocal obligations is going away. And there are people like Paul Collier's book, Left Behind, is talking about all these communities in the north and other sort of hinterlands of the UK. The communities are breaking down because their kind of mutual bonds have broken. Raghuram Rajan's book, The Third Pillar, he says, this, we always think of two pillars, market and the state, but there's a third pillar, which is community. And so there is a downside to taking away those norms completely as well, which is the other side of the spectrum where the state is completely, there's impersonal exchange, but the communities are breaking down and you don't have those sort of obligations and interactions.
So I very much agree on that. And look, one of the trends we see in Europe, for example, at the moment is a growing disaffection with government, anti-incumbency, right? And it's because of low economic growth, it's because of some of the challenges of jobs, it's opportunity, and so on. And you're seeing a response both on the left and the right of politics to that. But therein lies a bit of a challenge. I would say it's not necessarily the lack of norms, but it's the lack of networks. Yeah? And networks actually are really important to us. They're important to us as human beings, as social animals, which we are. They're important to us also for kind of information and for access. But if I may, on the norms piece, I think what's interesting is it's tempting to say, things like Safarish or Guanxi or Blatt, these are things that happen in developing countries, not in developed countries. I would disagree. I think what you see is the manifest in every country on the planet in slightly different ways. And some people say, well, laws replace norms. Well, I disagree, and perhaps I'll close here on the norms side, which is in London, as many of you know who've visited the UK, British people, there's a Desi friendliness, not just in Punjab, but is natural, right? With the British, it sometimes takes time to get British people to talk. Sometimes 20 years. Sometimes you don't have to wait that long, right? But one thing is guaranteed to make you have a conversation with a British person, which is stand on the wrong side of the tube escalator in London, right? And you will prompt a conversation, possibly some Punjabi swear words in English, from whoever it is that you're blocking. So it's not a law in the UK to stand on one side of a tube escalator, but it's a really powerful social norm. In London has a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for cars. And I would suggest that you would be a very bold human being to step out into the road, assuming that most people are respecting that. They don't. Yeah? So that just gives you an example in London where you have a norm that is not a law. You stand on one side of a tube, and a law that is not a norm, a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So it turns out that cultural norms remain incredibly important in terms of how the state operates, society operates, and how there is access to remedy when things go wrong.
That's so true. I mean, whenever I'm driving, it's a 20-mile limit. It's very rare I'm 20. It's usually 25 or 30. Okay, I've been shown a 10-minute sign, but I think we started 5 minutes late, so we'll try and finish in 15 minutes. But let's use that time for Q&A. So does somebody have a mic that they could, a roving mic that could be taken? Any questions, comments, feedback? There's some questions there.
Hello, I'm an O-level student, and my question to you is that how can the youth build those networks and communities which will promote this positive Safarish, so that how the state gatekeeps certain services and activities. So how can the youth prevent that from happening by creating those very communities and capacities?
Right. Maybe we could take another question. Another question in the back, gentleman in the back.
Hi, my name is Adeel Malik, and to my limited knowledge,
Can you please speak up?
Yes, to my limited knowledge, the term Safarish in its very nature is negative. First of all, people access for their negative terms or negative things to someone, or in case it is positive, so it is certainly incentivizing the system to exist or remain in that bad thing. And you see that today, if positive, it is positive. Students are trying to build networks instead of focusing on their skills or something. So, I want to know if it is positive, so does it not allow system to remain in that bad state or bad manner?
There's a question here. Okay, fine. Let's. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your attention and the nice presentation. I just intend to know about this kind of the new experience about the positive Safarish in the UK culture. Can you give me some good examples in that?
Okay. Let's take these three questions and then we'll have another round. Would you like to start?
The first one was just how do young people build those networks?
Well, I think we all do that. Every day we do that. For instance, you're here, you will shake hands with people, you will exchange cards, you will get to know someone. So you'll from here you'll go to some other place. So within your friends, relatives, and the society, we all the time are building some kind of social network. And there's nothing wrong about it. It's how you use it or misuse it, that's another factor, and how much the other person gives you the space to do that. But not that I want to advocate you to, concentrate too much on this and leave your essential work. The best Safarish is your work, which means if you're good at your work, if you're professional, if you're having excellence and some skill, that is your best Safarish. But even having that, still you need to live in the society, which the ground realities are always different. So do have a positive networking. There's nothing wrong about it.
I mean, in a way, it's also about how societies ration success and ration resources. I guess you talked about China. As the Chinese system began to produce more opportunities and more meritocratic opportunities, the salience of these this sort of Safarish would obviously go down. So part of it is linked with how much of the access is rationed. It's also about where does the state, whether or not the state is the primary provider of jobs. As societies diversify their economies, private sectors become a lot more important. Then those networks still matter, but the role of Safarish obviously changes.
Yeah, and let me try and come back on the second two questions. And by the way, the gentleman who asked said, well, hang on, isn't this actually a bad sign? The very fact you need positive Safarish says something about how the state operates that isn't very comforting and should change. I agree with you. So I think there's an element here where we rightly and properly, we should get a state that is more responsive, that is fairer, that is better at delivering services. At the same time, as you say, right, you've got to challenge, Guanxi is still used a lot in China because it turns out it's much more difficult to get a job in China now as a 20-something than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So actually it becomes a more important ingredient even as stuff is changing. But I'm going to say yes and, right? So yes, I think that role of positive Safarish should fall if state effectiveness grows. But at the same time, and to pick up your question up there, and I'll give an example from the UK, there's still always going to be cases where there needs to be a human decision, yeah, that remedies a bad decision by somebody in the system or by a technology system. And I give two examples of that from my time in the UK government. One, when I was acting High Commissioner, so an acting ambassador, is sometimes you get a case where somebody had been treated badly over a baby was born overseas and the processing wasn't going right. And it was back to kind of what you were saying about the state being slow, or a file being sat on, or maybe a misjudgment being made, or maybe not the right information having been supplied. And it sometimes was a 50-50 problem, right? Sometimes the complainant had failed to do the process right or give the right information, but sometimes also the state had been ineffective in handling the file. And I think that's an example where actually positive Safarish, even in the future, even with a good state, will still sometimes be needed. The other example I would give is when I worked in the heart of government, so working in 10 Downing Street in London and working in our cabinet office, the centre of the British government, which is where, again, my job was sometimes being a troubleshooter, right? There'd be a problem in government and they'd come and ask me to fix it. And that, again, would sometimes make sense. Now, what you don't want that to be is Chalaki fixing, right? But there'd be a problem where, again, the system had failed, or two offices had not worked together properly on something. Yeah? Or different departments weren't doing their job effectively, or this minister and that minister weren't talking because somebody sent a sad face emoji at 10 o'clock and nobody corrected the WhatsApp exchange, right? So there's something about, even in the UK, and Hannah, when I worked in 10 Downing Street, I'd say half my business in the UK government in 10 Downing Street was done on WhatsApp. No national secrets, no secret groups, but that shows the scale of informality, even at the apex level in the British government 5 years ago.
Great. So we have another 5 minutes for maybe we could squeeze a few questions. There's a question. There's a question here first, or maybe we can take your question.
Sorry,
fine.
there's one in the front row as well.
Okay, perfect. One question there, then some here in the front, please.
My name is Hamza, and my question is that young Pakistani talent is leaving Pakistan because they are fed up with this post-Safarish culture, either it is positive or negative, formal or informal. Digitization is being done, but it's done for only social services. So my question is, what role digitization is playing in keeping and utilizing that local talent in Pakistan?
What type of digitization is?
What role is digitization playing in helping youth in Pakistan, beyond social services provision? Yeah.
Okay, great. There's a question here, please.